Yeah, no doubt about that, and his team will go above Manchester United if they win this game today. 13 points currently. They go temporarily top of the table. Of course, Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea all set to play. What an endorsement that would be for the hiring of Rafa Benitez in these early stages of his tenure, and consider the reaction from some Everton fans. Maybe it will get rid of that debate for a while at least. Listen, more to come on this game, which kicks off in around about 20 minutes or so. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll look ahead at the games to come today that aren't just at Old Trafford, and indeed look back at last weekend. Stay with us. You're listening to Premier League Live.
It's the ultimate fusion of football and celebrity. The Best 11 podcast from TalkSport. Johnny Owen and Mark Webster interview the biggest names in popular culture, looking back at the role the beautiful game has played in their lives.
Paul Weller. Could I just start off apologising for last weekend?
Actor Stephen Graham. Good morning, Stevie.
Morning. Sharing their earliest football memories,
How they celebrated their team's successes,
culminating in their all-time Best 11.
Noel Gallagher.
Let's deal with the hangover and let's have it again after that.
The Best 11 podcast. Subscribe now on Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Tom Rennie. Join me for a weekly podcast, Week in the Tackle, available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm going to be joined by Brian Dunseth, MLS legend, to tackle the biggest stories from the week in soccer.
And the great thing about working with Tom and making Week in the Tackle is we're only going to be covering things we think are worth tackling.
This show is all about passion. What's going to get us riled up? What's going to get you riled up to give us all something to chew on?
We're not here to sit on the fence and tell you the stories of the day. That's what your phone's for. You'll be scrolling through Twitter while listening anyways.
Exactly. I'm scrolling through Twitter right now. I'll save you the trouble. It is all bad news. This show is about tackling all the news of the week, giving our take on why it's interesting and why we think you should know it.
Who should be sacked? Who should be bought? Who should be sold? Who was right? Who was wrong?
Strong opinion, big stories, no agenda.
Week in the Tackle is available on Mondays from wherever you get your podcasts. If it's a big story in soccer, we'll tackle it.
Got an unquenchable thirst for sport? Get up to speed with the day's biggest sports stories with the TalkSport hit. Crammed full of the latest team news, big match previews, and discussing the day's hottest topics.
An improvement week in, week out.
Plus, get all the latest results and full fan reaction to the biggest events in world sport.
It's a wonderful goal!
Satisfy your thirst for sports news with the TalkSport hit. Subscribe now on Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Women's Football Weekly Podcast.
With Faye Carruthers. All the action, excitement and drama from across the entire women's game.
Cleared off the line by Steph Horton.
Including the Women's Super League.
Ellen White is there to tap it in.
The UEFA Women's Champions League.
Lana Clellan striking from outside the penalty area.
And the Euro 2021 qualifiers.
On the edge of the area to Emsley. And Emsley's going to finish it off.
Plus, all the home nations' international friendlies.
Lucy Bronze with the strike from the edge of the penalty area.
World-beating big match conversation.
There's Jodie Taylor.
Subscribe now to the Women's Football Weekly Podcast on Acast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You are listening to Premier League Live, and the first game of game week 7 in this Premier League season comes from Old Trafford. Manchester United against Everton. The headlines from the team news mainly about Manchester United. Cristiano Ronaldo does not start. Can you hear me at the back of the room setting a fantasy football lineup? Cristiano Ronaldo does not start, but he is on the bench today, as is, which would usually be our headline, to be fair, Paul Pogba rested today as well. 4 changes from last week, 5 from midweek, 1 for Everton. Gordon comes in from Iwobi. Their injury list was long known before today. A bunch of other games today. We'll go through them in a moment. Now, though, let's reflect on last weekend in the Premier League.
Cancelo, who wants to shoot, does shoot. It comes through to Jesus. Jesus turns and scores. Chelsea 0, Manchester City 1.
Well, they have the goal that their dominance is deserved, John.
Spurs stretch once more, but Bukayo Saka up to the edge of the penalty area. Kane with a sliding challenge. Break back for Saka. And it's 3-0 Arsenal. And the Gunners are racing away with it. And thoroughly deserved. Tottenham absolutely all over the place at the moment.
Canos, who scored their first ever Premier League goal against Arsenal. Baptiste delivery. Tony is there. Wissa is there. Still in the area. Shot a goal. and a goal! It's 3-3. Whistler's got it.
What's Rose's delivery like?
Into the near post. There's the equaliser for Watford, and it's their talisman, Ismail Assar, heading in at the back post. Watford level.
There's a chance here for Mopé, who's in here. Oh, can you believe it? Neil Mopé has scored with virtually the last touch of the game. They've nicked a point. It's 1-1.
Declan Rice, that's brilliantly worked to Mikel Antonio. Antonio with the touch and the finish. What a goal by Mikel Antonio. It's a sucker punch for Leeds United, and West Ham's travelling fans go wild.
Vardy's around the keeper, turns it into an empty net. Jamie Vardy, he's got a hat-trick. Only 2 count for his side though. It's 2 apiece. Here's Jimenez, out muscling Bednarek into the penalty area. Raul Jimenez must score, does score. Wolverhampton Wanderers off and running. Raul Jimenez off and running.
Looking for their second, Gray to Decore. Abdoulaye Decore pokes it past the advancing Tim Krul. It's Everton 2, Norwich 0. Deere will take it, playing into the near post, and the goal for Aston Villa. It's Courtney Hawes. It could be a huge defeat for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Fernandes now with the ball into the box. 5 minutes have been added on. Edison Cavani with a header. It was blocked by Courtney Hawes. He's claiming it hit the arm, and Mike Dean has pointed to the spot. Bruno Fernandes up against Martinez. Fernandes, right footed, oh my word, he's blazed it over.
What a weekend it was last weekend in the Premier League, as brought to you by the Premier League Live team, who you're with right now. Tom Money and Paul Parker kick off your day. We are with Chelsea Southampton after this. Russ Hargreaves and Paul Mortimer. If you're in Ireland, you'll get Wolves against Newcastle with Toby Gillis and Rufus Brevitt. John Anderson and Trevor Stephen bring you Brighton Arsenal. Also today, Burnley Norwich and Leeds against Watford. Tomorrow, a whole host of games. The headline act, Liverpool Manchester City, 4:30 UK time. That one gets underway. Paul Parker, let's talk about a couple of these games and a couple of these teams in action. Wanted to start with the late game today, Brighton against Arsenal. Last week, Brighton played poorly against Crystal Palace, but as you heard there in our highlights, nicked a point in that weird M23 Seagulls-Eagles derby. Great finish by Neil Mopé at the end. But Arsenal, did they get their season up and running with that victory over Tottenham, or was Tottenham utterly diabolical and we learned nothing from that game?
Well, first of all, I want to call that derby the Bird Derby.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, I like that.
It should be the Bird Derby, to be perfectly honest, because that's closer than the other, the A23 one. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, Arsenal's first half performance was absolutely excellent. And it's easy to say because Arsenal's performances so far this season really haven't been great. But that performance for 45 minutes was absolutely excellent. The second half died a bit, but it was expected to, just by the fact of the way they performed in the scoreline. So it's always going to be difficult to replicate that. But I thought they managed the game out very, very well. And now Arsenal go to Brighton full of confidence, and maybe I think they'd be deemed the favourites in that game.
Yeah.
In that sense, and you would never have done that if they'd have played them earlier. You would have just thought they're going to be blown away by Brighton. Brighton had a bit of a blip in the game midweek, come back a little bit strong in the last few minutes, and that game is all about late goals, because we saw Brighton Crystal Palace go to Brighton, absolutely awful, battered. It was great, unbelievable defending, and they go and score later. And I think even made it even worse. I think it was Benteke who scored as well.
It was at the Amex last year, absolutely.
Incredible performance.
Ultimate smash and grab. I think they had 2 shots and won 2-1.
That was the game. That was the ultimate one, as you said, Tom.
Always worth turning on Brighton against Crystal Palace last 5 minutes every time they face each other. And certainly worth watching and listening to Brighton Arsenal later. In our game, Everton can go top temporarily. Man United can go top, but also today, Brighton can go top if they win, other results go their way, as they could have done on Monday. They're the only team in the top flight to have never been top of the top flight in their history at any point. The other 19 in it currently all have. So it could have been a massive night for Brighton. Failed on Monday. Results go their way. They could do it today. Elsewhere today, quickly on Chelsea, who lost last week to a brilliant Man City performance. They were poor in the Champions League as well. Have the wheels come off for Thomas Tuchel?
I don't think so. I think they've still got a bit about them. We saw saw it the way they were last season. And they will get their mojo back. But that performance, you've got to talk about City's performance. It was excellent the way they went up against them. And Chelsea kept allowing themselves. Kept giving City the opportunity to do what they were doing by consistently trying to play at the back all the time, and they made it easy for City. And they never changed the tape. They kept doing the same thing. But even then, when they scored City and the game opened up a bit because Chelsea had to come away from what they were doing before, that negative kind of play, City still managed the game. They still made opportunities. Chelsea still struggled to make opportunities. Fantastic performance by Manchester City against Chelsea. Yeah. Chelsea have to pull their finger out a little bit, because I think everyone fancied them to become maybe champions this season, and they're not showing that form at the moment.
And Paul, just finally today, before we get back to our game, which kicks off in around 10 minutes or so, the players are just going in from their warm-ups before we get to kick-off. A couple of games today that could be really interesting in terms of the relegation battle come the end of the season. Now, I know we're in the opening 10-12 games, and you shouldn't look at the table, I always think, until you get to that sort of mark. But Burnley-Norwich today and Leeds against Watford, I would suggest very, very important for staying in the Premier League.